do it live.
Okay. No.
We'll do it live. Fuck it. Do it live. I'll write it and we'll do it live. Thing sucks.
Welcome. Back in the States, and it feels great. We got the Garnet Fire exploding today, absolutely nuking off. She gone, as they say. The Palisades Fire lawsuit has been delayed for months. This cannot be true. Ventura County is taking the lead with prescribed fire, and Gavin Newsom is getting investigated by the feds. What a day, man. What a day. We have a lot to go over. I'm going to try to keep this thing moving along. Now, that intro, that shows you the fires, the puzzle pieces, filling in the gaps. We've talked about this a lot, how all of those missing puzzle pieces on the fire map in California eventually get filled, right? We're always working so hard to stop a fire right here, but then the next year it just rips off on that side. And then the only thing stopping that fire was the burn scar from this one that we fought so hard to keep contained in these lines. We have this inability to accept the inevitability of wildfire. And because of that, we keep bumping our head against the wall, stepping on the rake that Gavin Newsom insists the feds have not sent. I see you guys in the chat referring to me as the honorable man on fire. I appreciate you guys. I'm not so honorable, but neither are the people that are in these letters in DC that are being called honorable. It's just, I love it. So let's talk about first, why don't we talk about the Garnet Fire? Let's talk about the Garnet Fire. What happened with these lightning fires? Now, I told you, with these lightning busts, it will take some time. It's going to take a few days for us to see what these fires really want to do. It'll take a few days for them to fully reveal themselves. And, for the most part, Garnet Fire was, it was doing some stuff. It was kind of skunking around, though. And then it seemed like it just nuked off today. Now, looking at the alert wildfire camera system, just a little trick for you guys. If you want to get a sense of how significant the fire activity is on any given day, just click on active cameras. And that means it's not a very active day, right? Without knowing anything about fire behavior, you can just see there's only a few active cameras. And typically, these cameras are only going to be active when there's something worth watching and something to pay attention to. You see the biggest cluster is down here looking at the Garnet Fire. Now, we had a pretty spectacular sunset on this thing, by the way. So we gotta play that at some point. But there was some pretty dramatic cloud formation above this fire that everyone seemed to have a reaction to today. Now, I had posted this. Does a tall convective column mean that a fire is experiencing explosive growth? Because, I see my radar weather, and whenever I see weather people chiming in on wildfires, my hackles go up just a little bit. And I'm not trying to be a dick, but I will say that weather people tend to think that they know a lot more about fire behavior than they actually do. Now, weather is a huge component of wildfire activity, but it is not everything, okay? It's not everything. Now, when you see a big convective column like this, what is happening? What is this stuff up here? What is that? Because it looks like a nuclear warhead going off. Now, what I can tell you with my experience on the fire line, you guys please chime in if it's different from you. But what I can say from my experience is when I look at this fire, I see a very soupy fire. It's very soupy. And what we have is with these thunderstorms and all of the atmospheric conditions that are conducive to these thunderstorms, you already have the conditions for convection, okay? You have a lot of moisture in the air. This fire is going to be pushing that hot, moist air up past these mixing heights, and you're going to see that cloud formation on top. Now, it's really easy to conflate that with the smoke. It's not the same thing, okay? That's warm, moist air that's hitting cooler air, and because you already have so much moisture in the air, it's going to be more dramatic. Now, when you see a big convective column like that, it certainly means you're getting a lot of heat energy. That heat energy, just like the more heat energy you throw into a hot air balloon, the higher it's going to go. It's the same with that column. But I'm telling you guys, sometimes that just means you've got a small drainage with very decadent fuels that's nuking off, and it may only be 100 acres, but there's so much convective energy behind it. And especially as it gets into denser fuels, you will get more heat output. So you're not going to see grass fires throwing up a massive header like that. But as things get into the forest, right, these heavier woody fuels, you will start to see that. There's going to be more heat residency. Each tree that's burning, it's going to take longer to consume. So it's going to be consistently adding to that convective column. So while it is true that when you see that kind of convection, you could get a column collapse that's going to blow out your fire, and it's pretty common. And it could mean that it is exploding in growth. But today, we only had about 3,500 acres, only 3,500 acres of growth. We started the day around 9,000 acres, and right now we're around 12,000 acres. It's probably a bit more since the last flight. This fire is 4 days old. So if it's 4 days old, it grew 3,000 acres today with all this hubbub. Is it really exploding massively? I would say no. But what is happening? Because, we can't deny that there is a significant change in the fire behavior, or at least the smoke production and the column production on this. So what happened? What happened? Does anybody know what happened today and why it's doing this? Why is it putting up this nice show? Superpav says, in fairness, that's a weather channel and the Doppler radar is exploding from the convection. That's a solid point. But they're not showing the Doppler radar. They're showing the column. They're showing the column. And this is the thing. It's like that column always looks super spooky, especially, to the average civilian who doesn't have much experience with this. They're going to look at that and think it's absolutely nuclear because it kind of looks like a nuclear bomb going off. It's not necessarily the same thing. Daniel Firecopter says, some people were saying pyrocumulonimbus that didn't even form. It was just a big pyrocumulus. Otherwise, there would have been rain and lightning. When it gets that high, you will oftentimes see hail. I saw hail on multiple fires where it was kind of soupy. You had thunderstorm activity in the area, like the hog fire back in 2020. Hog fire had tons of thunderstorms pushing in every day, and those fronts were creating a little bit of chaos, but it would also kind of self-regulate because there was so much moisture in the atmosphere. When that column went up, it would pee on itself, right? And that would moderate the fire activity quite a bit. Now, the thing is, at this point in the summer, that moisture is not necessarily going to help your fire season, but it will help on the day, right? The plants right now, they're dormant. They're not going to actually absorb any water, but that wetting rain will put a little bit of a lid on some of the aggressive fire behavior. And what they're seeing at night is this fire is kind of behaving, and they're able to construct some line. But why this big show? If it's not burning, if it's 12,000 acres and it's a 4-day-old fire, then we just burned the same average acres. Why did it look so different today? Where is it burning? Where this fire is burning is right about here. Who knows what this is? You can already see it. It's the Rough Fire. This is from 2015. So the Garnet Fire had been burning through here-ish, and now it's starting to burn into here. It's now getting into an area that does not have burn history. Now, this viewer is showing us all the fires, all the significant fires in this area since 1995. Since 1995. So we have 30-year fire history, and you see this big, giant puzzle piece that is waiting to get filled in. You'll notice a lot of these empty puzzle pieces have been filled in. Up here, you have the Creek Fire. Down here is the Rough Fire. Down through here, I think you have the Windy Fire from a few years ago. Look at all those puzzle pieces fitting in nicely, right? It's just like that song at the top of the show, everything in its right place. So this thing has now transitioned out of the Rough Fire scar, and it is now burning in fuels that have not had significant fire history in the last several decades, maybe more, okay? So you have a lot more decadent fuels. That means you're gonna get a lot more heat energy coming out of this thing. Now, fortunately for now, there's not necessarily explosive growth. You have explosive convection, and that can certainly lead to spotting. It can lead to column collapses. It can lead to a whole host of issues. So I'm not saying that like it's a nothing burger when it's going nuclear like that. All I'm saying is these two things, explosive growth and explosive convection, they're not necessarily linked. Yes, oftentimes it means you're getting a gnarly fire, but it's not necessarily true, right? We measure fires by acreage, and the acreage didn't change that much, as opposed to the show that it put on changed a lot. What's going to be more concerning is winds. That's what's going to drive that explosive growth of the perimeter of the fire and make it more unpredictable. Now, it's going to be interesting to see what happens. Like I've said, this has been a very muted fire season. It's been a very muted fire season. It's been interesting to watch. Nothing is really biting. Nothing crazy is biting. And I don't want to jinx anything, but you can see it for yourselves, guys. We're not getting the crazy kind of fire activity that we all remember from 2020 and 2021. This is feeling a bit more like 2019 in a lot of ways. But if you remember in 2019, what ended up happening was nothing was really happening until October. Then all of a sudden it was just chaos. You had the Kincaid fire. You had the Tick fire roll through my neighborhood. You had the Easy fire. You had, was it the Getty fire? You had some really nasty stuff. And then the Cave fire all the way in through November. So you guys got to like kind of stay buckled up. But what I'll say is when you have fire activity like this year, this is the kind of year where you should be doing a lot of prescribed fire, because you're clearly not on a ton of campaign fires. We don't really have campaign fires going on right now, and they're not really biting the way that they normally do, that we're accustomed to. Now, Ventura County has answered the call. I saw this was sent to me earlier today. This is Ventura County taking the initiative. Now, you guys have followed me for a while. You know how much I love Ventura County. I think it's a great agency. They have some of the best hand crews in the country, right? And for a municipal agency, I was always really impressed by their hand crews. Those guys really get after it, super knowledgeable, really loved being around those guys. I lived in Ventura County for many, many years. They're using this device called BurnBot. Now, I happen to know the founder of that company, so I know quite a bit about this device. I was sort of on the inside when they were developing this thing. And it's a really interesting device. You can see it's got this big roller on the back and sprinklers on the back. What it's doing is you've got this big burn chamber where they have basically like propane burners that are incinerating these grasses inside a chamber. So all of the combustion is contained underneath this big contraption. And you've got fans up on top in those sort of turbine looking things. And that's generating a ton of heat and it's ventilating the fire. And the thing is, it burns so hot, it even incinerates the smoke. That's how you notice there's no smoke coming out of the top. It's because it burns so hot on the inside. It's actually incinerating the smoke too. That roller on the back, it stamps out the fire. So it's going slowly, gives it time to consume, and then the roller stamps over the fire. And then those sprinklers on the back are just dousing it with some water. And so you have clean and relatively cold black trail behind this thing. It's a very interesting device. Now, the question is, where would you use this thing? That was the question that I always had for them when I was talking to them, because I'm thinking about, landscape scale firing operations. I don't know how this is going to handle that kind of terrain. Now, they have a bunch of different solutions for this. They've got robot controlled dozers that they would use. They also have a bunch of, manual labor. They've got a bunch of old hotshot crew guys, and they'll, remove fuels from an area. What they'll also do is they'll use this around the perimeter of a burn and then burn interior to that in a sort of grid pattern. Now, this use of it is very interesting. Our biggest fire of the year so far, Santa Barbara County, burned right off the side of the road, right? Caltrans territory. This is a very interesting way of dealing with these roadside grasses. I know I get annoying because I'm always talking about how, why do we allow any vegetation by the side of the road? You get a ton of starts, a ton of wildfire starts from just tiny little sparks going into this stuff. and then it spreads. So if you were to just clear out a band like this, any cars that pull over that are overheating, any vehicle fires, you're going to reduce the odds of them spreading into a major wildfire. This seems like a really, really interesting use of this device. This might be perfectly suited for BurnBot. I think we finally found a way for these two issues to shake hands. I think we found a great application for BurnBot, and I'm stoked that Ventura County is leading the way. And this is an issue, right? Caltrans is responsible. Gavin Newsom's agency is responsible for two of our biggest fires of the year up in Santa Barbara County because they started right off the road like this. Well, I like this. And the thing is, you can burn basically any time of year with this thing. That's the beauty of it. All of it is contained in there. So there's no risk of losing a burn. I mean, there's a minor risk. It's a minor risk. I'll never say no risk. KCK says, we had a small fire today from a motorcycle crash on the I-5. Telling you, very, very common cause is vehicle fires, chains dragging, an exploding tire. Yes, the occasional cigarette. I think that's a lot less common than people may realize, but that's like sort of a cinematic way of starting a fire. So I think people latch onto that a little too much. The highway right-of-way is 100% federal land, if you ask Gavin. That's the thing. It's like, even if it's Caltrans, Gavin's always going to say it's federal lands if it becomes a big fire. Dude, he's back on his bullshit, by the way. Thanks for bringing that up, Super Pav. Gavin is back on his bullshit. He is doing this stuff again. The Garnet Fire burning on federally owned land, the most irrelevant non sequitur. It's just there for him to be a cunt. I'm sorry, but that's all that this is. This is cunty behavior. It is so unbecoming of a head of state. It's so weird that the blue-haired intern running this account thinks that this is a good idea. This is not a good idea. The thing is, you guys know what the Streisand effect is? You ever hear of that? Barbara Streisand, she, notoriously wanted privacy from the press, and she lashed out kind of proactively, like, hey, nobody take pictures of my home. And then everybody wanted to take pictures of her home. Suddenly people who were not interested in Barbara Streisand's home suddenly were really, well, why is she saying that? There must be something interesting. And so now all the press is like flying helicopters trying to take pictures of her home. You don't want to call attention to something, right? If you don't want attention on it, don't call attention to it. Gavin Newsom doing this dance where he's going to always call attention to whose responsibility a fire is. And he's going to, instead of like, hey, it's all California, we're all on one team. If he's going to start doing this, well, guess what? The worst fire, the most egregious one, right? The one that's full of tomfoolery, the one that's getting investigated by the Attorney General, the IRS, the FBI, the ATF. These are all the federal agencies that are currently investigating the Palisades Fire. It started on his land. And if he weren't doing this bullshit, then people wouldn't be dividing up the state based on the responsibility areas. Well, now we are. And you see me on here all the time showing the maps of the SRA, the FRA, and the LRA, showing where it's his responsibility. This is like the Streisand effect on steroids. What's funny is he's not talking about the Picket Fire, which is burning up next to one of his wineries, right? So he owns Plumpjack. He owns Plumpjack, and he bought up a property near Calistoga back in 2022. Plumpjack Winery Group buys Eastern Napa County Vineyard for $14.5 million. Now, that may seem like a lot of money, but guess what? That is a quarter of what that land is worth. At most, it's a quarter of what that land is worth. How did he get this property for a quarter of what it's worth? Well, because a portion of it burned up on the glass fire in 2020. So Gavin Newsom swoops in like a vulture and snatches up, with a low ball offer, snatches up this fire-tainted vineyard. And it's the Oso vineyard. Now, you had CAL FIRE guys over the last few days, I think maybe like 2 days ago, they were staged outside of his property doing structure triage and structure protection to try to protect this property that he snatched up from fire victims on the cheap back in 2022. This is how this guy operates. And the irony is that all the dudes on that division hate Gavin Newsom. And they were so annoyed. They had to be there protecting his property, especially when it's like, like this is now he purchased it from Michael Mondavi. Now they're not necessarily like hurting for money, but at the same time, the damage that was done from the glass fire is significant. And we're talking like maybe $1 million or $2 million to repair. I think they had a block of the vineyard that burned up. And so all those mature vines, it's going to cost a lot of money to replace that. Save California Hat says Spencer is all over this. I love it. Yeah, Spencer is he's a bulldog, dude, and he's not stopping. He's not stopping. And the thing is, he's getting results. I know it may seem a little bit annoying that we're always talking about Spencer, but he's getting results because he's such a hound dog on this. And I'm telling you, he's actually pretty deliberate about vetting the information that's coming into him, because it's like drinking out of a fire hose. As you can imagine, there are a lot of people who have insight into fire operations or local politics or, land purchases, stuff like that. They're all hitting him up because they don't want to speak out because they have something to lose. And so they're sharing this information with him. He's actually pretty good about vetting through this stuff. And because he's so loud about this and he doesn't stop and he's doing it constantly all day, every day, he's actually getting results. Now, we covered this where Senator Rick Scott is actually writing to the Department of Homeland Security. Now, he's on the Homeland Security Committee in the Senate. He's writing to the Director of Homeland Security asking for basically an audit of all the federal dollars that are going into wildfire stuff in California, whether it's suppression or it's relief. He's primarily talking about the relief funds that are going to this. We talked about how unkosher it feels. Now, I understand California Act generates a ton of federal revenue. I'm not going to downplay that at all, right? They are they provide a net positive amount of federal revenue. The main issue is that wildfires, unlike hurricanes or tornadoes or other floods, wildfires, at least the damage, is preventable, right? And we know how to prevent it. And we have other states that do a good job of preventing this stuff. And California is always, always lacking. And yet they're always asking for residents of Maine and Vermont to bail them out, when Maine and Vermont never have any need for FEMA dollars, but California needs billions of FEMA dollars every single year, right? Every single year. So Rick Scott is going after this. And he specifically names Spencer Pratt as the impetus for all of this action. And if it weren't for Spencer taking Rick Scott on a drive through the Palisades in the fire area, this wouldn't have happened. And especially with all the anecdotes that Spencer now has access to, because he's got God knows how many people in his DMs and texting him all over the place. All of this is happening. Well, now we have more. This is from Capitol Hill.
What has happened, what we have learned, is absolutely beyond belief. In the aftermath of these fires, which destroyed 18,000 homes and killed, tragically, 30 people, there was a fire aid concert in which a number of high-profile musicians generously agreed to perform, and people responded in an amazing way. Tens of thousands of people donated, raising $100 million for what they were told was direct relief for the victims. But now we've learned that this money didn't go to the victims at all. Instead, it went to nonprofits, some of which have nothing to do with fire relief, where they promote things like voting and civic engagement and multi-generational power building. Some of them aren't even located in LA. So I've asked the Attorney General to open an investigation in order to restore the intent of the donors, in order to make the victims whole and to bring accountability. I yield back.
Guys, this is serious. This is serious. I don't really, I don't know Kevin Kiley. I don't really care what you guys think about him, but he's a hound dog on this as well. But now you've got it in both chambers. You have multiple senators who are on top of this now. Obviously, Senator Sheehy is always going to be on top of this. He's the most educated on wildfire in the history of Washington, D.C. I don't think he's necessarily interested in rocking the boat. And he's kind of just in there to make things as good as possible for the operators and for the private contractors who operate in the wildfire space. But guys, it's going to get serious. And I think DC is going to come down pretty hard on California. Now, we talked about the difference between good dollars and bad dollars. And we're not even talking about this fire aid stuff. And the more I'm looking into it, the worse it actually gets. I don't know if you remember my first few live streams about the fire aid thing. I was kind of hedging a little bit because, I feel like it's really easy for people to go off the deep end with some of this stuff. And, a lot of the charities that were involved seem to have pretty good ratings and pretty good dollar ratios. And the reality is if people need food, it is going to be more efficient to go through an agency that buys food in bulk. Maybe they've negotiated lower prices with food distributors. Whatever money you pump into them, you're actually going to get a force multiplier as opposed to just giving people money directly, right? So there are circumstances where it makes sense to, not launder, but push that money into a force multiplying kind of nonprofit. But the reality of the NPOs in California is they're hopelessly corrupt on such a broad scale. We know this to be the case with the homeless NGOs. It's just a complete racket. Now, the smoke that I always look for to determine whether or not you're dealing with a scam is, as you pump more money into it, does the problem get better or does it get worse? To me, it's just a simple tautological argument. If you notice that the problem is getting worse the more money they put into it, what does that say to you? KCK says, the humanity if Gavin has to cut his hair gel budget by 50%. Man, that guy's got great hair. I'm jealous. He's got great hair. I'll give him that. But I mean, that's what you get when you have a life of privilege. When you live a stressful blue collar life, you lose your hair. But there's this weird threshold though, right? For some reason, wizards will, they'll smoke meth. They will eat, Jack in the Box out of the trash can. They sit outside in the sun all day and drink booze on the beach, and yet they have a full head of hair. And then privileged guys like Gavin Newsom, he's never had real stress in his life. He's just coasted through life. He had super wealthy family. Daddy gave him money, and he runs the state like a mafia. And it's like, I remember he got caught banging his best friend and campaign manager's wife, and then had to do this embarrassing press conference. And that just rolled off his back like water off his hair gel. It's incredible. This dude is slick. He is super slick. He's like Floyd Mayweather of politics. But I really do feel like the Palisades Fire kind of broke him. And Spencer's kind of breaking him. It's interesting to see. Bobby G says, I hope Kevin meant AG Bondi and not California AG Bonta. That is correct. He means AG Bondi. Now, Bondi, I'm frustrated with. Okay. I don't have any political attachment to either party at all. But Pam Bondi is the attorney general in charge right now. So she's the only person we can get disappointed with. And there was a lot of talk about pursuing this, and it's just sort of dying on the vine. Now, on that note, the Palisades Fire lawsuit switched judges today. It got assigned to a new judge this morning, and this new judge decided that, you know what, Palisades Fire lawsuit, not a priority. There's not any headlines on this, so this is just me speaking because I know some things. This judge decided it's not a priority. We're going to bump this back to December, which would make it a full year after the fire, and there's no restitution for these victims. This is unacceptable. Again, it's easy to think because Billy Crystal lived there and all these other celebrities live there and a significant amount of wealthy people live there, that it's all just wealthy people and they're fine. Guys, they're not all fine. Trust me. They're not all wealthy. And for a lot of people who are high net worth individuals, their net worth was because they had a paid off home that they bought for $500,000 40 years ago. And now it's worth $6 million. Now it's gone. Okay. So that net worth is gone. And a bunch of these people had their insurance canceled right before the fire. And I mean, right before, like the month before the fire. So they're in a bad way and they don't have anything. They can't take a HELOC out on their house. They can't do it. The house is gone. So they have all these carrying costs. They have living expenses. These people have been renting out homes for 8 months now. It's a lot of money. And if anybody is trying to live in the general area around the West Side, do you know how expensive that is? You know how crazy expensive rent is anywhere around there? We're talking like $12,000, $15,000 a month. So these people are hurting. They cannot wait all this time to get restitution. Fortunately, super lawyer Alexander Robertson got on it immediately, went immediately down to the courthouse and was able to convey to the judge the urgency of this case and all those things that I laid out, right? These people are hurting and this needs to be addressed immediately because justice delayed is justice denied. And fortunately, the judge heard him out, listened, agreed. They actually bumped the next hearing up to, I believe, the second week of September. So 2 weeks from now. 2 weeks from now. So this is a nice victory. You know, I've sung the praises of Alexander many a time because his case, even though it's not Spencer Pratt's case, look, when you have a series of lawsuits, you have multiple classes in different lawsuits represented by different attorneys. You have to pick a lead case, right? So the first one to do all their homework and turn it in, that gets assigned as the lead case because they're not, if these cases are basically the same defendants, the same essential evidence, the same series of events, you just have a little variety of where the addresses were, then you have to assign a lead case so you're not trying multiple cases the same time over and over and over and over again, right? Basically all the same arguments. So Alexander's lawsuit is the lead case. He has done an outstanding job and his researchers have done an outstanding job. All of this stuff that we're seeing on TikTok, every day on Twitter, about all of the scandal surrounding the Palisades fire and all the things that went wrong, it is thanks to Alexander and his team, right? It was their research. I used their research to do that first live stream when all this stuff blew up. That was back in July. So I just want to make sure that we're acknowledging that you've got a team of dozens of people who are working on this stuff day and night, and they're doing outstanding work. And the thing is, even though we're seeing some stuff move in DC now, because Spencer Pratt has elevated it to that level. Remember, Spencer Pratt didn't have any fuel until the lawsuit, right? That was what springboarded all of this. And ultimately, we cannot count on AG Bondi, who has kind of just vanished on this issue. She was supposed to be releasing stuff like 2 weeks ago. That's just gone. And, you know, I like what I'm hearing out of Kevin Kiley. I like what I'm hearing out of Senator Rick Scott. But DC always lets us down. And so really the only accountability that we're going to have is this lawsuit. That's it. That's the only way we're going to get justice. And frankly, that's the justice that matters most. You're never going to see Gavin Newsom in handcuffs. You're never going to see Karen Bass in handcuffs. It's never happening, right? But hopefully these people can get paid. Hopefully they can get paid. And the thing is, there is precedent for this. I don't know if you guys remember Hermit's Peak Calf Canyon fire. Was that 2021 in New Mexico? These were Forest Service prescribed fires. One was a burn pile. I think one was a broadcast burn. And the snow flew. They thought it was out. It was smoldering underground throughout the winter. And then when the snow melted and you got some winds kicking up, rekindled this old prescribed fire. And then it nuked 300,000 acres outside of Las Vegas, New Mexico, burned up a bunch of homes, destroyed the timber industry. And so the feds took responsibility for it. And they promised to pay the victims. A lot of victims still haven't received money. And this is still the case with the Camp Fire in Paradise, because Gavin Newsom ran cover for the power company that started the fire and their old, shitty, poorly maintained equipment, right? And they're still not getting paid. There's a bunch of people who still haven't been paid. And that was what, 6-7 years ago? That should be a little bit of a sign of what's to come. And unfortunately, I think the same thing's going to happen to the Eden Fire victims. Obviously, this was power lines. It's kind of an open and shut case for the Eden Fire, and that's why we don't talk about it that much. But man, I'm worried. Basically, what's going to happen is, even if there is a payout, there will be, but like, how long is it going to take? And then who's going to pay for it? Gavin Newsom helped push in a law that forces you to pay for it. The costs of these liability lawsuits for these wildfires, when the liability is on the power company for having faulty equipment, you pay for it. Gavin Newsom paved the way where it's okay for the power companies to make you, the ratepayer, pay for their settlement. Isn't that crazy? And that's what's going to happen here. That's what's going to happen here. So the power companies, if they're responsible, they're just going to make you pay for it. It's so screwed. I don't love it, but that is the way it is. Super Pev is saying California Chinese wine is coming in 2030. What do you call that wine? What do we call the China-owned vineyard wine that we know is coming? Because we know a lot of Chinese companies are snatching up real estate in the Palisades and in the Eden Fire in Altadena. Daniel Firecopter says, if every county had burn bot and used it where fires start, maybe we'd see less fires. I agree. And BurnBot is an interesting example. I rail on the VCs all the time, these Silicon Valley venture capital companies all the time. I don't love that there's this gold rush with wildfire suppression, right? I don't love that we have Lockheed Martin getting into the space and they're going to make a ton of money off this stuff. I don't love that. I don't like the idea that people are profiting off of a problem that really impacts people's lives in a very devastating way and kills people. I don't like it. And, obviously, we need firefighting equipment. So I'm not trying to throw the baby out with the bathwater, but we all know that an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. Okay. It's a cliche for a reason. What I like about BurnBot, it's the first and only company that I'm aware of in this Silicon Valley VC world that's actually trying to make a business model around preventing fires. I love this. It's going to be, I've had a hard time imagining the application for it, because a lot of the areas where we need to reduce fuels, you're not going to make this thing find its way up the El Medio Trail above the Palisades, right? That's not going up there. But seeing how Ventura County is applying it, I think this is brilliant. Right? We've talked about, why aren't we firing off the roads? Well, there's two reasons why you wouldn't want to do that. You got to shut down the freeway because it's not safe for guys to be walking with drip torches along the side of the highway like this. But this thing, sure, why not? The other reason why we wouldn't want to do it is, well, what if it escapes? This thing keeps it captive. So maybe this is the ticket. This is how we do prescribed fire along the roadways. And it's a slow process, but I mean, dude, you put your head down, before you know it, you've done 150 miles. You know what I mean? And it's better than what we have now, which is nothing. All that Caltrans will do is mow and spray pesticides, and that's it. That's it. Daniel Firecopter says, we're still getting fires no matter what. Doesn't matter if Lockheed Martin joins in on it. Oh, that's the point. That's my point. They see how, especially in California, it is this perpetual money printing machine. That's why they're getting into it. And the thing that I've warned about Lockheed Martin, because what they're doing is in the AI modeling space, they're really pushing their AI fire modeling stuff, where what they're claiming is that their technology can dictate to the fire managers exactly where to put their line, where to put their retardant, where the fire is going to go, and where they're going to have the number one chance for success. Here's the problem. They're going to hang their hat on this, right? hey, our algorithm knows exactly what to do to stop this, unlike you humans who are just winging it, saying, hey, man, I think we should put the retardant over there, John Wayning it. Here's the problem. What do we know? Dude, when Mother Nature takes control, when that fire is really ripping, there's nothing stopping it. Nothing. I don't care if it's AI or a human decision, there's nothing stopping it from taking over that ridge, right? So what's going to happen is the first time Lockheed Martin takes control of the fire, things going to blow out. It's going to blow past their lines, destroy a town, and now they're on the hook. And then you've totally invalidated this entire model. So they got to be really careful with how they're over promising this stuff. Seriously. Super Pav says, SoCal Edison already has a ratepayer fund for Eden Fire, and it's basically nothing. They try to do this thing. There's the Wildfire Relief Fund that essentially it's money. It's a cost sharing thing where the state is taking your taxpayer dollars and putting it in the coffers that the power companies get access to when they start a wildfire and destroy people's lives because of their shitty equipment. They get to pull out of that fund to sprinkle at the victims. And what they do is they will throw a lowball amount at them early on, because as we see with the Palisades lawsuit, as with all of these lawsuits, they usually take like a year for anyone to get a semblance of restitution. Most people are going to drop out just through attrition. They're not going to be able to hang on for that long. And so they're betting on some old folks who are like looking down the barrel of a 10-year rebuild going, I ain't waiting for this shit. I'm too old. Yeah, give me the offer from the Wildfire Relief Fund. And they're going to settle for pennies on the dollar. And that's what these power companies are banking on. That's what Gavin Newsom is banking on. Dude, I don't know what the solution is, but this feels like a very weird, corrupt system, and I don't like it. So I'm very grateful that the feds have taken an interest in auditing what in the hell is going on with California wildfires and why we continue to pour money into it. And yet the problem only seems to get worse. It only seems to get worse. Some people will say that's because climate change, or that's because, expansion into the WUI. These things are factors, but why is this not happening in other states? It's just not. Now, other states also do practice aggressive fire suppression and not enough prescribed fire. And so they are suffering some of the consequences of that, but not on the scale of California. It's always California. There is something unique about the special sauce in California that's just like really bad. Oh my God, save California hats. I asked earlier, what is going to be the label on the Chinese-owned winery? What's going to be their wine? Pinot Gris. Pinot Grigio. Oh my God, that wins. That wins the evening. Oh my God, I love that. Phil Cunningham, the cunning Phil Cunningham says that in regards to the Wildfire Relief Fund, there's not enough money in that fund, and it was a one-time allocation, and it won't be renewed. Dude, where's the money going to come from, Lebowski? That's the question, right? This is going to be billions in these settlements. Where's it all going to come from? Looking up info about BurnBot, and I see PG&E talking about using it. And you know why that is, Casey? The reason why PG&E is talking about using BurnBot is that BurnBot successfully tested this device underneath power lines. Normally, you cannot do prescribed fire under power lines. And this is a big challenge. I will concede, yes, I want no fuels anywhere near power lines. This should be obvious, right? Because this is like one of the primary issues for most of the devastating fires we've ever had is power lines, right? But it is a Herculean effort. It is so difficult and expensive to clear out fuels around power lines because you have to do it manually, because you can't burn under power lines. Because if you get enough carbon, soot, smoke going up into the power lines, you can have enough carbon in between the power lines that it will actually arc and then explode and shut down power and create a huge nightmare. So that's been an issue. Whereas BurnBot, because of the way their device works, you see there's no smoke, there's no soot coming out of the top because it burns so hot, it actually incinerates the smoke. They successfully tested doing prescribed fire under power lines. I think that was a first. So that was one of the interesting things that I learned about BurnBot when I was at their headquarters. They can burn under power lines. So this opens up new doors. This is the kind of wildfire industrial complex. I won't even call it boondoggle, but this is the kind of for-profit business I am okay with. I am perfectly fine with people making a profit off of making a difference, right? And I think this could make a difference. It can make a serious difference. And seeing the way that Ventura County is applying it right here, I love this. I don't know why I didn't think of that. Maybe because I'm not that bright. But you know what? I'm a little bit more tan because I just spent some time in Mexico, and man, oh man, was the food good. I'm so fat. I'm so fat, dude. I had so many tacos when I was down there. But I love Mexico. I love Mexicans. They're just so nice. I really love Mexico, man. It's a really special place. All that said, I'm very happy to be home. Very happy to be hanging out with my donk and our chickens and our pig. The other thing is, I don't know if you guys heard the new album from Linkin Park. You guys into Linkin Park? You know how they got a new chick singer to replace Chester? I finally started listening to their album. Dude, I like it. Dude, I think it's really good. I think she's actually really good. I don't know what you guys think. I know it's kind of a controversial choice, but I think she's great. So anyway, that's my life. Linkin Park, tacos, working till late, getting a tan, feeling good. AI can't get a tan. And remember, in this dystopian world of AI, the only way to prove you're a human is to do it live. Thanks for doing it.